What a great blessing it is to be in worship together on this Thanksgiving Sunday, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, when we certainly give thanks for those who have served our church as organists and for our organ builder. And so we are so grateful to all of you. And of course, we continue to give thanks for Peggy, our current organist, as well. And it's just a blessing to continue in this month of Thanksgiving when we have given thanks for the saints who've gone before us and the saints that surround us, that we can give thanks in this way. And we can prepare ourselves for this week of Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving holiday. Have you ever neglected to give thanks? Well, let me ask it this way. Is there anyone in this room that has never neglected to give thanks? I can't imagine there would be anyone. And we have lots of reasons for it. We get busy, we just forget. We perhaps neglect to recognize the blessings that we have. Or we neglect to recognize those people. We take them for granted, those who around us who help us in one way or another. Our story from the Gospel of Luke is about not giving thanks and giving thanks. And so I want to ask you to use your imagination and imagine that you are one of 10 people who have a skin disease. That's what these folks have in the text for today. And this is not today where you can go to Walgreens and get an ointment for it. Rather, there's really no cure. Oh, there are probably things that people try, but no cure. In the traditional translations of this text, it says that these 10 people have leprosy. Today we use the term leprosy to refer to Hansen's disease. It's a particular disease, devastating in its effect, not only a skin disease, but also a disease of the nerve endings. But this is much broader than that. The word here refers to a skin disease of some kind. And if you have that, then according to the Hebrew Scriptures, the law in Leviticus, you have to wear clothes that are torn. You have to go around wherever you go shouting, "Unclean! Unclean!" to give notice to anyone that may be nearby that you are coming so that they can keep their distance from you. You're unclean. In fact, you have to live outside the camp. You can't live close to others. You have to be separated from everyone else. And this persists into the first century in the day of Jesus. And so on this border between Samaria and Galilee, there are 10 people who suffer from this condition. They're separated from family. They don't know if they'll ever be cured or not. They don't know if there will one day be an opportunity to go to the priest at the temple and have the priest declare them clean. That's also in Leviticus. It's a requirement for them to rejoin society. They may do the best they can. People who give them stuff, alms paid to them, people who give them food, or more likely people who leave food for them and then get away because they're unclean and they don't want to be close to them. That's the life that these people live. And misery loves company, and so they've banded together, not only for that reason, but so that perhaps they can support one another, and there's strength in numbers, and because otherwise they would be desperately lonely. And then one day, as they stand waiting for something to happen, for some stranger to come along and be kind to them, they see Jesus. Now imagine that you're part of that group and somebody says, that looks like that itinerant teacher. And they say he can heal people. And yes, he has people with him. Those are his followers. And so they cry out, not unclean, unclean, but they cry out, "Jesus, have mercy on us." And Jesus, when he sees them, he says, "Go and show yourselves to the priest." That's all he says. They know what that means. That means that perhaps there's a chance that when they get there, they will be clean. And as they make their way, they are cleansed of this dreaded skin disease that they have. One of them, the Samaritan, remember this is the border between Galilee and Samaria. The Samaritans and the Jews, you may recall, hate one another, but misery loves company. People who share a common need will band together, even overcoming those kind of long traditions of hatred. So there's a Samaritan who's part of the group. He's the one that turns around when he sees that he has been made clean, and he goes back and with a loud voice praises God, falls down on his face before Jesus and gives thanks. And Jesus' response is, what? He doesn't say, wait a minute, but it's sort of there in the text. Wait a minute. Weren't 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to come and give thanks except this foreigner? And then he says to the man, get up, go your way. Your faith has made you whole. Only 1 out of 10 gave thanks. This is, in a sense, a story about forgetting to be thankful. It's a story about living life and leaving gratitude out of it. And on the other hand, it is a story about the power of gratitude in our lives as well. It's easy to forget to be thankful. We could name many times, each of us in our lives, when we thought, oh my goodness, I didn't even say thank you. That's easy to do. But it's also possible for us to live our lives out of gratitude in such a way that is transforming. And it's that I really want to focus on this morning. Because gratitude is really part of who we are. We want to be thankful, and we want to be thanked as well. So when you travel to another country and that the people there don't speak the same language, what are the words that you want to learn? What do you want to be able to say? You want to be able to say hello, and what else? Every time. Thank you. Thank you. You want to be able to express gratitude. As Mr. Mark said earlier, it's thank you, 2 of the most important words in the vocabulary of any language. Mark Twain, it is said, at the height of his career, was paid by the word $5 a word. Well, that word got out, and so he received a letter one day that said, Dear Mr. Twain, enclosed is $5. Please send me your best word. And so the correspondent received a letter back that said, thanks. It's the best word. It's the best word. It's the word that we can't really do without. And so what does it mean when we're thankful, when we live life of gratitude? Well, one thing it means is that we acknowledge that God is the source of all. And that's a challenge for us today, I think. I really do. As we sang our opening hymn a moment ago, I thought about it as we were standing in the aisle, the choir and I and the other worship leaders, and we were singing. And then we processed into the words of that hymn. And the hymn talks about the harvest, and all is gathered safely in before the winter storms begin. And it was written 170 years ago or so, when those words were very real to people. And for everyone in this congregation, I think, we're very far removed from those words. From the harvest, from it all being safely gathered in, from being utterly dependent on that harvest and being able to put up the crops in a silo or in jars. We're removed from that. And so gratitude reminds us that God is the source of all. That all that we have and all that we are come from God. And gratitude reminds us of that relationship of God's gracious provision who gave us life, and God who loves us, and God who pours out grace upon grace upon grace. And gratitude, living in gratitude, reminds us of that. Living in gratitude is good for us. It's good for our health, actually. There are studies that have shown that if you live with thanksgiving, if you live counting your blessings in gratitude, then you are healthier mentally, physically, psychologically, spiritually healthier. Just living with gratitude. This past Tuesday, Susan and I went to the opening night of Irving Berlin's White Christmas at Bass Hall, and one of the songs in that show says, "When I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep, and I go to sleep counting my blessings." And then he sings to a little girl, "When you're worried and you can't sleep, count your blessings instead of sheep, and you'll go to sleep counting your blessings." People who count their blessings sleep better, studies have shown, and are healthier in every way. It's a reminder to count our blessings. Sometimes we forget to do that. When we live a life of gratitude, it is a way of seeing the world that's better for everybody. Rabbi Harold Kushner says that religion is perhaps more than anything a way of seeing. In our scripture reading for today, there is this way of seeing that we see. Seeing is important in this scripture. Jesus saw the lepers, saw the people who were suffering, and he healed them. The one who returned to give thanks saw that he was healed, and so he returned to give thanks in gratitude. Seeing the world in a certain way. It's a part of what it means to count our blessings. How do we see the world? Do we see the blessings around us? Are we paying attention? Do we see the people around us that are in need? And when we see, how do we respond? Do we respond like Jesus and reach out to that person in need? Do we respond like the Samaritan when we have been the recipient and give thanks to God? Perhaps more than anything, gratitude is a way of seeing. There's a pastor from another generation named H.W. Beecher, and he had an image that went like this. He said that gratitude, a grateful heart, is as though I had sand and I put iron filings in the sand. And if I have an ungrateful heart, I can search for those iron filings with my clumsy fingers and I will find nothing. But if I have a grateful heart, it's like a magnet, and I move the magnet through the sand and the magnet will attract to itself the iron. And a grateful heart is like that. It moves through the day and attracts to itself the blessings. And so gratitude is this way of seeing the blessings around us that would be otherwise invisible to us. It's a way of seeing. And then gratitude is a way of living. Years ago, there was a little girl who came to this country as an immigrant. She was learning the customs from Vietnam. She was learning about Thanksgiving, but when she said it, she misunderstood the word and she called it thanks-living. And inadvertently, she came up with a great word, didn't she? Thanks-living. It's living out of thanks. And when we think about living a grateful life, it means that we will respond in giving as we have received. We'll respond in blessing as we've been blessed. We will respond in loving as we've been loved, and in extending grace as we have received grace. Because that's living with thanks. Thanks living. There's an old story that I want to close with. Once upon a time, there was a wise elder. And this wise elder had a young friend that he mentored, that he taught. And this wise elder, when the end of his life was approaching, gave his young friend a bag of blessings. And he said, this bag of blessings will always be full as long as you remember the 4 magic words. The bag of blessings will always be full if you remember the 4 magic words. Well, as time went on, as the young man began to share the blessings, as the young man began to receive the blessings out of the bag, he forgot the 4 magic words. The bag was getting empty. And so he began to panic. He thought, if I don't remember the 4 magic words, I won't be able to refill the bag with blessings. And so he went to visit a wise man to ask him. He told him the story. He asked him, what do you think the 4 magic words would be? And he said, perhaps the 4 magic words are, I wish I had. I wish I had. Well, he tried that and it didn't work. Those were not the 4 magic words. I wish I had didn't do it at all. The bag of blessings continued to get emptier and emptier. He went to seek the counsel of someone else, and he asked the same question after he told him the story. And the suggestion was, how about give me some more? He tried that out. Didn't work either. The bag was nearly empty, and he sat down on a park bench, dejected. A little girl came and sat beside him. She had her lunch. He shared some bread with her that he had. And she bowed her head and she said, I thank thee, Lord. And he remembered. Those were the words. And the bag was full of blessings again. That little story reminds us that when we have the eyes to see and the heart to feel gratitude, when we have the eyes to see and to count our blessings, and when we acknowledge that God is the source of all, then we begin to see the blessings all around us, and the blessings are abundant. This week, as we go from this place, I encourage you to remember to give thanks, not just on Thursday, and not just as you fall asleep in front of the TV in the football game counting your blessings instead of sheep, but every day, and not just this week, but throughout the year. May we be people who are part of the 10% in the story that remember to give thanks. Amen.